Hello everyone, my name once again is Philip Matthew. I'm an educator and media professional based in Saco, Maine. And right behind me, I have the pond next to my house. Just beyond it, we've also got a vernal pool, and what we're gonna do right now is go on an exploration of those two different ecosystems. So if you've learned at all about wetland ecosystems before, you've probably heard that they're pretty important, but sometimes it's a little hard to understand exactly why. So for the most part, wetlands are ecosystems that exist where there's a lot of water, where that's a big part of being in the ecosystem. And that's really important because it's also, by default, a boundary between two different ecosystems. Right behind the camera is a big grassy field, and there's, different types of grass growing, there's different invertebrates, different mushrooms and things living underground. There's some plants living on top, and there may be some birds. We've seen deer pass through here, those kinds of organisms. But when you get to the edge of a pond, you can have all of those same organisms as well as everything that can live in this pond. I've seen a couple things. Right now, I can actually see on the other bank, and we'll try to get up close in a minute, we've got some painted turtles that live in this pond. We know we have at least 3 different types of frogs that we've heard so far this spring. There's all kinds of insects you can see swimming around, making ripples on the water. We've got cattails, which have adapted to be plants that can live with their roots in the water. So when you have 2 different ecosystems, so grassy or forest, as well as a pond, at that intersection, you get all kinds of cool organisms, cool types of life that can make it their home. So wandering along the mucky edge of the pond here, I'm keeping my eye out for some of the bigger inhabitants of the pond. I'm especially looking right now for frogs. I know we have a couple pretty big green frogs, as well as most likely some bullfrogs. We've heard plenty of peepers, but they're a little harder to spot. But I haven't gotten to know this pond well enough to really know where to look first. If you listen carefully right now, you can hear some birds making this like chirp, chirp. Those are actually red-winged blackbirds. We have several different red-winged blackbirds that make this pond their home, and this is the time of year that they're starting to nest, which means that somewhere in among these reeds or along the shore, there's another frog, somewhere around here they probably have eggs that they've laid. And so with me just walking around, even though I'm looking for frogs, they're worried that I'm a predator, preparing to harm their eggs. But I'm not, don't worry. So if I watch carefully on the surface of the water right here, I can actually see that there's something going along and eating. I'm hoping it'll get a little bit closer so it's a little easier to see. It's right behind the cattails. Oh, there it goes, sticking its head out for a second. You can also see all the little black flies flying above the water, especially if you look towards the left of the screen. And even, I think there might be some mosquitoes. We haven't had too many out this year so far. We're now over on the other side of the pond, and I want to step away from the pond for just a moment to show you our vernal pool. In addition to things like ponds that make wetlands all year round, there are also really cool ecosystems called vernal pools that only exist in the spring. Here in Maine, we get a lot of snowfall in the winter, and when that all starts to melt, it will often form these huge pools, kind of like large puddles, that won't last for the whole year, but provide a pretty good amount of water for a little while. So the pond's over to this side, but if we follow over here, I'll show you right next to the pond, there's an area where water tends to pool in the spring. We're surrounded by fields and bits of forests, and in this particular spot, a lot of water collects and forms a vernal pool. If we get up close, you can actually see that there's all kinds of bugs moving around here, and there are some tadpoles. Now, the tadpoles are kind of hard to see while they're in the pool, so I've brought some out of the pool and we're gonna check them out right now. Right here in this dish, it's actually one of those dishes that goes under a planter, but you could use a Frisbee, you could use almost anything that you're okay getting in the mud. I've got 4 pretty big tadpoles, a couple tiny little tadpoles, and a whole bunch of insects. I'm gonna pull one tadpole out in my hands just so you can get a slightly closer look. Hey buddy, let's get you some water. So here's one tadpole. Let me see if I can get a better light on that. Now, I happen to know that this tadpole is from a wood frog. The only reason I really know that right now is that we've seen which animals came to this pond or to this vernal pool all spring, and we identified which types of eggs they were laying. We also recognize their calls, and from that I can tell you that this is a little wood frog tadpole. It's really cool. If you get up close, you can see that it's got that thin tail, and as it gets bigger and bigger, eventually it will drop that tail off entirely once its legs start to grow. I'm gonna let him back now. If we get up close to this dish, you'll also be able to see some insects. So hold on a second while we move the camera and we'll see if we can get a shot of that as well. So you can see those tadpoles swimming around. They're probably a little bit nervous, not really knowing where they are, trying to find the way out. So I'm gonna let them out pretty soon. But you can also see right now all those other tiny little insects floating around in there. I've been able to notice at least 3 different types. There's even actually a really tiny tadpole sort of towards the center of the screen right now. So I've noticed at least 3 distinct types of insect roaming around, and I don't actually know how to identify them, but luckily there are a lot of resources you can use online that will be able to give you some examples of what insects to look for in vernal pools, in ponds, in streams. The things you want to look for are, make sure you Google whichever type of wetland it is, if it's a pond or a vernal pool or a stream, and make sure that you specify Maine. That will help you narrow it down to the types of things that we find in our part of the world. The last thing I want to show you before the end of the video is just how cool a wetland can be at night. Behind me right now, I still hear those red-winged blackbirds, but now I can hear spring peepers making a lot of noise, as well as a couple different other types of frogs. Probably some of the very frogs that we saw splashing around in the water earlier. I never managed to catch one or get a good look at them, but that's probably a little better for the frog, and I can hear that they're back to normal now. So go find a local pond, a vernal pool, or a marsh is also a cool place to check out. See what you can find, see if you can find any tadpoles or bugs. Just remember to be safe if you're near a pond. Stay near the edge, don't go swimming until things are warmer and with permission of an adult, of course. And otherwise, I hope you get a chance to get out there and explore.